Hello and welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and my guest today is bone marrow transplant recipient and runner, golfer and tennis player Simon Perkin. Simon speaks openly about receiving 2 bone marrow transplants following a battle with aplastic anemia, as well as his sporting achievements, including running the London Marathon 7 times and winning multiple medals at the British, European and World Transplant Games. I appreciate this is a longer episode, but like last week, I didn't want to cut out any parts of Simon's story, so please stick around to learn more. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Simon Perkin, welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport.
Thank you, Lewis. It's very good of you to invite me.
Pleasure to have you on. Now, you are the first bone marrow transplant recipient on the podcast. So first things first, for those who might not be aware, what is a bone marrow transplant?
Well, that's a good question, because when I first heard about it, I didn't have a clue. A bone marrow, as I interpret it, I'm no medical expert or anything, but I'd say that the bone marrow essentially is the factory where all the blood's produced. So you may have heard of things like red cells, white cells, neutrophils, all those type of things. But you can't exist basically without the bone marrow. And the bone marrow is the factory. It's the workshop where everything's produced. And I suppose in terms of, you think of a dog with a bone, well, it's the stuff inside the bone, if that makes sense.
We were talking about it the other day when we were having a little sort of meeting and prep, and I referred back to, again, I said at the time, this might sound silly, but I referred to when you see the bone marrow of a chicken that you might cook at home and you see the little brown bit inside. Is it as simple as that?
Well, yeah, I think it is. I mean, to be honest, I haven't even bothered questioning it. I think initially when I was told I need a bone marrow transplant, I actually thought there was something physical that goes into me. Like as you say, like a chicken or something, some bone. But it's far from that. What it is the blood. So it's the liquid that goes into you, and it really is a bag of blood. So if anyone's had a blood transfusion, or obviously just cut themselves, it just looks like that. That's all it looks like. But it's so precious to save people's lives. It's so essential. And most transplants today are 90% are stem cells as opposed to bone marrow, and 90% are stem cell. Now that involves the donor sitting there for approximately 4 to 5 hours, and they have the stem cells taken out of their own blood, stripped back, and then the blood goes back in. And it's pretty simple process for people to do, and it's painless, and it's a fantastic thing that anyone can do. And we're encouraging people to sign up for the register for stem cell and bone marrow, because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have a transplant, and a very kind stranger had come forward. So that's the stem cell. If I touch on the bone marrow, which is only a 10%, in that case, the donor, they have a general anaesthetic. So they don't know what's going on. And what happens is they have the surgeon goes into the hip bone and extracts the bone marrow, the liquid, and that goes into a bag into a bag, and then that's infused into the recipient. The donor may feel a bit of a bruise, a bit like if you've had a knock, whether you've been playing sport, something like that. Nothing major. They might get a bit of a cold. As I say, they don't know anything about it anyway. They wake up from the general anaesthetic, and I know people who've, smiling. They're being captured there with the likes of a wonderful charity, Anthony Nolan, who really looking for people aged, I think it's 16 or 18 to 30, because it's the young people, obviously the healthiest, who are the best to donate. Having said that, you can also donate up to the age, I think it's about 55, through, if it's in the UK, the NHS. And also there's a great organisation called Delete Blood Cancer. Delete Blood Cancer, they started off in Germany, and they've got no restrictions on their ages. And this applies right across the world. So anybody can register. And it just makes sense to me. But it's something that a lot of people don't know about. They may have heard about organ donation, and it's great that what you're doing is promoting any kind of transplant. People may have heard of kidney, lungs, and heart, but perhaps and bowel. Perhaps they haven't heard so much about bone marrow and stem cell.
Where can people go if they want to register to donate?
Well, as I say, if they just literally Google or search how to become a bone marrow or stem cell donor, that will come up, I'm sure. There's Anthony Nolan, who are one of the biggest registers of bone marrow and stem cell potential donors. And there's also the NHS and Delete Blood Cancer. And I think further afield throughout the whole of the world, there's different organisations within their respective countries. I just think it's fantastic. In my case, I was diagnosed a long time ago now. It's actually 30 years ago now, 1991. And I went to give blood, and it was the time of the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and I wanted to do my bit. I couldn't obviously fight. I was very fit, extremely fit. Played all sports, football, rugby, squash, running, you name it. And I went to give blood. Fine. 12 weeks later, I went again, and they said, "Oh, there's something wrong with your blood, and you're anemic, so we can't have your blood." And so then they said, "Go and see your doctor within 24 hours." Well, I was young, very much enjoying myself. And I thought nothing of it. I thought, well, if it's that serious, they'd put me in an ambulance. So I just went home and just carried on. But what I found, Lewis, was that I was just getting so tired. I don't know whether you've had that.
It sounds similar to my start. I know it's different with kidneys, but it was right. It was a blood test in my case rather than donating blood. But a blood test, it flags up. Go and see your doctor. Go to the hospital now.
Mm.
And you don't really know what's going on. I don't know if it's the same for you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I didn't really think about it, really. Perhaps I'm a bit daft, and I know my name's Simon, but perhaps I'm a bit simple as well. But I suppose, like anything, unless it's that serious that it prevents you from doing things, you don't, do you? You just carry on. And I suppose for me, I was still playing football, and I remember the captain actually of the team. He said, "Simon, what's up with you? Where's your energy?" I used to play centre of midfield and run around and kick everybody basically, and yeah, I didn't have that energy level. And I remember playing squash, and I had to stop between points and have a bit of a breather, which wasn't like me. And what I found was just literally within a couple of weeks, I thought, well, I better go and see the doctor. I didn't have any physical signs or anything like that. I didn't have any bruises, which is often a common thing with leukemia, blood cancer as it's called now. And I hadn't fainted or anything like that. But I went along to the doctors, and they did some more blood tests, and they then put me on some iron tablets because my hemoglobin, which gives you all the oxygen, that was very low. And then I was on these iron tablets, and I just carried on playing sport, going to work. I lived on my own at the time. I had a flat in Manchester, and really just carried on going out as well, clubbing. At that age, I was 25, 26, and yeah, I was so tired. And then I went back to the doctors, and now looking back, it's only really maybe like yourself, Lewis. It's when you look back, you realise what was going on and put things in perspective.
Yeah.
And when I went to the doctors, I was at the point where I was just so tired I could almost stand up, and fall asleep, a bit like a horse, really. They fall asleep, no, they stood up. And so he said, "Well, we don't really know what it is, but I've arranged for you to go to hospital, Manchester Royal Infirmary. Pack your bags." And so off I went. And I just packed, a few boxer shorts and a few bits, toiletries, and off I went. And then I was in there, and it was the time of AIDS, actually. AIDS was a big thing, and they said, "Well, we need to test you for something," and everything, actually, because we don't know what it is. Um, and so they did these tests, and I remember, um, I still remember to this day. I suppose you will as well when you first diagnosed with something. It was Dr. Colin Geary, lovely gentleman, and he knew I played sport and everything. And he said to me, he said, "Well, I'm awfully sorry to tell you, it's a 1 in a million. This is, but it's not good news. You've got something called a very rare form of leukemia called aplastic anemia, and we need to test your brother very quickly. My brother Robin, he's 2 years older, in good health, and we need to test him to see whether we can do a bone marrow transplant because the only cure is a bone marrow transplant for this condition." And of course, I mean that just really you just think your world's ended.
Yeah, I can see that.
You're just completely distraught, just in the lap of the gods, really.
Did it put everything back into perspective? That the fact it was 1 in a million.
No, I don't think it really put anything in perspective. It was just the shock, I think. 1 in a million normally you associate with winning a lottery ticket or something like that. Um, I didn't really think about probabilities or anything like that. I think it was just the overwhelming news. And you start thinking, well, I start thinking, well, why me? You know, there was a relief that it wasn't AIDS. I'm not practicing homosexual or anything like that, which tended to be the case, although that's not the actual case in reality. But people used to think that there was a horrible stigma, and nobody would have tests of AIDS, or they didn't want to. They could test you for everything else. It wasn't that, but it was this thing called, aplastic anemia. I didn't know what that was. We didn't have Google. We didn't have the internet, so there's no way to search information. You're totally reliant on the doctors and the medical staff, and you place your trust in them as people do, and that's what I did. So I really was listening to them, and I was like a sponge. My brother was tested um, quite quickly, in a matter of days, but unfortunately, he was told he wasn't a match for me. And in those days, back in 1991, they only did bone marrow transplants, as they called them, but I think they call them more now stem cell. Um, they didn't do them for adults. The science has moved on now. They do them. And so they said, well, we can give you some kind of treatment. Now, at the time, they didn't tell me, but they told my parents, who obviously were distraught, as you can imagine, that I wouldn't live really until I was perhaps 40. If I got to 40, well, that would be amazing. Very unlikely. Certainly wouldn't get to 50. And life's not going to be good. He's not going to be well. He's most probably needing blood transfusions. But they didn't tell me that, thankfully. I'm glad that they didn't. I didn't really want to know it. I was just thinking, why, what are they going to do? It was just completely hopeless, really, and just live day by day. As it was, I had some treatment. I was in hospital for, I think it was about 8 weeks, in a room on my own. And in those days, only one person could go in the room, and you had to nominate them. And that was other than the cleaner and obviously the nurses and the doctors and the consultants. And there was just a window to the room, because they were so worried that you get an infection. And all the air was sucked out and it was all cleaned. And so people just used to look through the window. They've changed things now because they know psychologically that's just so tough on people. I have to say it was tough. I mean, it was almost, you feel like you're a prisoner. You can't go out because of risk of infection. So I was strapped to a machine and receiving this medication, and I was getting sick, and it was diarrhea. I was in a right mess. Not eating properly. I had something called what's it called? Lymphocyte globulin. It's called lymphocyte globulin, and that was the extract of a horse, um, and some serum, horse serum or something like that, mixed with some other things. Um, and I had a reaction. You have a reaction to this. It's called serum sickness. Temperatures, sweating, not sleeping. I mean, it was pretty horrendous, really.
Was that a treatment attempt?
Yeah, that's a treatment. That's that they hope that will restore the bone marrow to maybe fully functioning ideally, but at least some functioning so that you're not reliant on blood transfusions and platelets. And in my case, I managed to get out of hospital. I mean, I was lucky because whilst I was in, I could still remember to this day. In those days, the ward had a mixture of children, male and female, and there was a little boy next door. Um, I always remember it. His name was Jonathan. And I remember asking the nurse, and he'd come in his football kit, in his Manchester United football kit. And I asked the nurse how is how is he? How is Jonathan? And he said, and the nurse said unfortunately. Well, he didn't actually say anything, and that's often the case with nurses. They're so good, they're wonderful, compassionate, and caring. But essentially, he hadn't pulled through, and he'd a little boy had been playing football with his mates, got a knock, rushed in, and often it's bruising with leukemia, where the signs are the bruising, but they don't settle down, they don't resolve themselves, and because the platelets are so low. Now, in my case, my platelets were 6. I was told by Professor Colin Geary, which is a lot less than it should be. It should be about between 150 to 300. And that really supports your bruising, how to recover properly. And when I look back, I'd had 2 black eyes, and I hadn't had no one had smashed me in the face or anything like that. But I'd just been playing football. I must have had a knock, and I remember going to work and people obviously looking at me, thinking, what's he been up to? And I hadn't been up to anything. I'd just been playing. But once you have a knock, there's no coping mechanism for your if you have any bruising. So my platelets were like really low, ridiculously low. So there was a danger that if I had a knock, then I'd cut myself, and then it would just carry on bleeding, and I'd have a brain hemorrhage. And then also my hemoglobin was 6 as well, which should be for a male between 13 and 15. So I was just operating on such a low base. I was like 10% of an engine.
So did any bruises just spread massively?
Yeah, bruises can spread, and apparently one of the signs is that you can just have uncontrolled little specks and bruising. I remember Colin Geary, the doctor, the consultant, him saying to me, he said, "I know you play football and rugby, and they're great games, particularly rugby, but I don't want you doing that. Stick to cycling," he said. And I thought, well, cycling's boring. I don't want to be doing cycling. I laughed about it at the time because I used to go back to the hospital at Manchester Royal Infirmary. After I came out, I could still remember to this day, I walked down the stairs, my mum picked me up, and I walked down the stairs, and I was struggling. I couldn't even walk. I was so weak trying to get down the stairs. And I can still picture it now, me walking down the stairs. And my mum said, I've got the car in the car park. Thankfully, it wasn't far away. But I went out and I went outside and I smelt the petrol, and it was disgusting. And you could, because your senses are so sensitive, especially when you've been in a controlled environment where everything's been cleansed and the air's been cleansed, and so there's no impurities at all. So you're susceptible to everything. But my taste was obviously heightened, and smell, as a result of all this conditioning. But I was so weak, and I remember looking at my legs and think, well, I used to be, pretty powerful playing football and rugby and running, and they were just like skeletons, really. I'd lost a lot of weight, and then really it began a journey of recovery. But what I said to myself is, if ever I have to go back into hospital again, I won't just, wait for the doctors and the medics to tell me what to do. Um, and I just committed to then really just massive action on how can I get myself better? Will I get better? And it's down to me. If it's to be, it's up to me. Um, and I really believe in that, because if you've got that force, that drive, then you're halfway there. And if you're waiting for other people to tell you what to do, it really is a tough game. And it was while I was in. It was like war, and I'd encourage anyone, if they're in a situation, a really tough situation, think of those people who are worse off than yourself. Think of the people who are in pain constantly and how they get through it, and they'll find a way. And it's this inner strength that I'm sure a lot of people who have had a transplant, somehow they find it, or they've had a major setback, because hope is so important. And if you give up hope, then really it's real tough. And I just thought, well, how lucky am I? I've had some treatment. I could have died, and I didn't know that my life was going to be very short or anything like that. I just thought, right, I'm going to get myself back to work. I needed to get back to work. I had a flat, I've got a mortgage, and I haven't got anyone else to do it. I was lucky that my mum was around, my dad was around, and I had some support. Quite honestly, I know people who've had transplants and they've lost everything. I know someone who had a pub, 3 kids, running his pub, and he lost all his business. And there's nothing there to pick you up. And in my case, my priority was just to get healthy, and that's what I started doing. I started reading everything, and I started working on my physical health to begin with.
I think that's the right mindset to have, because when you do take ill and you're not really sure what the prognosis is, what the outcome is going to be, you do realize what is the most important thing to you. You have that reevaluation and rethink, and health becomes number one, family becomes number one, and just as you said, getting through each day as they come, and just trying to make as much progress as you can to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you've gone through it, Lewis, and I think all of us, no matter who we are, um, health. And I was the classic, I was the classic. I was out partying, enjoying myself. I used to go to clubbing on a Tuesday, out on a Friday, out on a Saturday, 8, 10 pints. Wasn't uncommon on a Friday, Saturday. Um, go for a curry afterwards. That was the mentality. I think, certainly in the what was it, early 90s. I was in Manchester, Manchester. Home of the hacienda, big club scene. Work hard, play hard. That was at age 25, 26. And the culture was a bit of a drinking culture, and play hard, work hard. And why not? And I didn't know any different. And yet, for me, what it really started me to think about is number one, health. because if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. That's the starting point. If you haven't got your health, you can't go to work. If you haven't got your health, you can't go out. You just can't do anything, can you? And family, I think, as you say, it's great to have friends, but family, if you've got family and really close friends, I mean, I can count, and I'm sure a lot of people can. I can count on one hand the people who really, when it came to it, offered help. And I was I'm a very sociable person, and I think a lot of people find that you start reevaluating things, as you say, and if someone who hasn't got any family or any support, I mean, it must be so tough for people. I really admire people who have gone, against the existing environment or whatever, and done tremendous things in their life through that drive, and I think it's so important.
We'll move on to the actual bone marrow transplant, the first of two. Spoiler alert. Uh, what was the process of finding a donor? I know you said your brother was worked up.
Yeah, well, in my case, I mean, I carried on working and everything, and I was having blood transfusions post my initial treatment in 1991, and then I mean, I carried on, and I ran the London Marathon. I think about 6 times during that time, and yet when we got to 2000. Again, had a similar type of treatment, this anti-lymphocyte globulin, and I'd moved down to Oxford. I was working for NatWest for in their business school, essentially a teaching and facilitator. But what they said was, it got to 2011, and things were not looking good. I was starting to need, or that my blood counts had gone so low again. I think before I said to you, my hemoglobin was 6, but it had gone up to about, I think about 12. So it was quite reasonable, and my platelets had gone up to about 40, which was okay. But once they go to about 30, your platelets, that's a concern, and you might need blood platelet transfusions. And if your hemoglobin generally, if it goes below 10, then again you might need blood transfusions. So the signs were there. I'd always been monitored, going for regular checkups, and that's the beauty of it. I think if you're diagnosed with anything, you're in the system. We're so lucky in our country having the NHS. They're fantastic. Really are. And so what the consultant said to me around 2011, I think it was, he said, well, things are not looking so good. What I think we need to do is put you on the register, because if things get to the stage where you're needing blood transfusions, I was 46, something like that, 46. You will need and I knew that the only cure was a bone marrow transplant. And so he said, we're going to put you on the list. We'll go on the register, appealing really for someone to come forward. And what they do is they look at your body tissue type, and to see if there's someone on the list as a potential donor who is a good match. And the ideal match is 10 out of 10. And so they started searching in 2011. I think it was about the January. And by I think it took about 6-9 months. And I was in close contact with my consultant. And really, you're just waiting. Life's so uncertain, and thinking, well, will they find anybody? What happens if they don't find anyone? And my parents had then told me later on, I got married, I've got a son, and he was he was about 11 at the time. I was so lucky that, to see my son grow up, to get married. All this was extra time that I never thought I'd have. So I was so grateful. But they found 2 people, believe it or not. amazingly, one person in the States, um, and no, sorry, we're not in the States. I was confused. When you've had chemo, Lewis, it doesn't half affect your memory. I tell you, it really does, especially when you're getting on like me a bit. They found someone in England who apparently was doing quite a lot of work in the States.
Right.
And they said, as a potential donor, and they said, unfortunately, no, I can't commit to coming into hospital. Obviously they need to have tests, medical tests, because they need to check that they're um, medically fit and healthy. Because it is a very complex procedure, putting someone else's stem cells or bone marrow into another human. But very fortunately, they found someone else. So they didn't just find one; they found two people in my case, and some people never get that opportunity. And they found someone in Germany. Now I didn't know this person; all I knew, they found someone, and I thought, wow, you know, wow, this is, I've got a chance. There's a possibility, and I didn't even think about, well, will it work? Because I don't know. I suppose you just grasp what might be and then look at the possibilities. I suppose I've become immune to almost thinking negatively. I always think positively.
Is that hope again?
Yeah, yeah, and that's something. And I think part of that is the fact that I used to. I've read widely about successful people and about people who've had major setbacks, and also in life and in business. And I used to teach personal development and leadership, all about leadership and winning mentality at the business school. So it was almost like in the DNA. And I've always been, someone who wants to win and wants to achieve the best you can be and be your best and search for excellence. That's what I'm about. And anyway, they found someone miraculously. Um, and so then it was a race. It was really a race against time. How quickly could this donor make themselves available? How quickly could they be tested? How quickly could I be tested? So I went through all the tests that you could imagine, chest x-rays and whatever it was, all the blood tests that they do. And they're looking to get that, get it ready. Obviously, I needed to protect myself and not get a cold or get ill. I was actually carrying on playing sports. I mean, I was okay to do sports. I was actually doing karate. Perhaps I shouldn't have been doing karate. But my son was doing karate and my wife was doing karate, and we did it as a family. And we all got our black belts, which was fantastic. And I suppose, like most things, you just carry on as best you can. Got to get to work. And anyway, so in 2012, I remember I was working at a school, and I went into the school, and the head wasn't there that day, and it was just before the Christmas break. And I'd been told that I would be going in for a bone marrow transplant, but they couldn't give you a date. I mean, they don't say, yeah, you'll be going in on, say, the 5th of January, because the bed situation is they don't know. They really don't know. It's that critical. Um, and so you really just have to be, you're just glad of anything, really. It's wait and see. And so I was told that I was going in at some point, perhaps in January, but they weren't too sure when.
Does that make it difficult to prepare for it?
What it is with,
Or mentally?
because I'm in a situation, and maybe a lot of people can relate to this, where you're employed in a job. The last thing you want to do is say to people, your employer, actually, I'm going in for a major operation, and I might not live, and I might not come back. Equally, I hadn't told them. They knew that I'd had leukemia in the past, but I'd been fit and well. I'd been at work. I'd never had a day off sick, apart from in 2000 when I had some treatment, which I said back in Oxford. I just didn't. I wasn't sick. It wasn't the case of I had a condition where I kept having to be off I might have to have some. I didn't need any blood transfusions, you see. So I was lucky, and outwardly, and I suppose I was a bit guarded, that I didn't really want to let my guard down because I felt it was a weakness. I think if you're with an employer that's very supportive, and things have changed, a lot of employers are not a lot more switched on now. But it was a bit like mental health. I mean, if you were told you had cancer in those days, it was almost like a death sentence. And I've read about this, that they reckon even now, if you've been diagnosed with cancer, your chance of getting another job are about as good as a criminal.
Right.
That you've got a criminal record. I mean, that needs to change. But I can understand from an employer's point of view, if you're in a business and you've only got 5 employees, say, and I'm a critical employee, and I say, well, actually, I've got cancer or I've got leukemia or whatever, well, they're going to be thinking, well, he's not going to be around. He's not going to be much use. He's going to be off sick. I've got a business to run. So I was lucky. I was in a school, but I hadn't told them. But I had a duty, obviously, because I did an important job. I was a work experience coordinator there, and all these kids were relying on me. So I went into the head's office, and the deputy was there. And I said to the deputy, Chris Salmon's his name, a lovely chap. And I just said, I'm awfully sorry to tell you, you know that I had leukemia in the past, and I've been for appointments recently, but I'll be away from school for a while, and because I've got to go in for a bone marrow transplant in January. And what was great, Lewis, was that Chris, actually, his dad had leukemia. And so straight away, there was that empathy there. And I think most people find this in anything, don't they? Whether it's cancer, whether it's transplant, whatever it is, mental health. Actually, when you open up, it's surprising, and it's so positive. Most people would know somebody. I mean, now cancer. I mean, 1 in 2 of us expected to have cancer during our lifetime. But in those days, even in 2011, I mean, 1991 was first diagnosed. It was known as the Big C. People didn't talk about cancer. People still have a stigma about it. It's got better. But anyway, so I just said, look, I don't know whether even I'll get through it. I might not come back at all. I might be dead. But the chances are I'll be off. Now, I'd been off previously when I'd had some treatment for about 3 months each time, and then got back to work at full capacity. And the expectation was that I was going to be off for at least 6 months anyway, if it went well. And the head was fantastic, and a lady called Julia Morris, who unfortunately is no longer with us, and her brother, when I spoke to her on the telephone, she was so supportive, and she said, her brother had sadly died through leukemia. And so I was left thinking, well, I don't need to worry about the school. I've covered that now. I've told them. So I felt a bit better, I suppose, as better as you can do, the fact that you're going in for some major operation. But I was scared stiff. I can remember packing my bag, going. I got a lift there. I didn't know what to expect. I had to have what's known as, I can't remember what it's called now, a lining. And they put the line in your heart, going from your heart, which enables them to put blood, liquids, because often you get dehydrated, saline, which is put into you when you're in there, and also the medication. So they put this thing in, and it's a bit awkward. You've got to keep it clean, and anyway, so I arrived there. Oxford, sorry, it was Oxford Radcliffe, top hospital. I've been under the same consultant, Dr. Tim Littlewood, for about 10 years now, and he, very supportive. And I was, here we go again. I thought, let's go. There's a bit of bravado, but you just think when they close that door, the first night, you really just think, God dear, how am I going to get through this? And then it just starts, doesn't it? I suppose your natural defense mechanism and your fighting spirit kicks in. So when I was in, I took the view that every day my target was just to get up, have a shower, and get dressed and get some food down me. And initially, I had to have chemo, and that was brutal.
Is that in prep for the bone marrow transplant?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was about 5 days. And they say, we've decided on your conditioning, and they keep you informed, but you don't really know what's happening. You just really just respond. You're just sitting there, and it's just day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, survival mode. And you know, and that's what I'd recommend to anybody. Don't look ahead in terms of, and don't think about all these other things. Yeah, it's good to focus on the possibilities of and think about what you might be able to do, but really, just concentrate on today. Today, can I get up? Yeah, I mean, I know when I was in, there was a chap just down the corridor. We didn't have any contact with other people. We're in isolation again. It's got a bit better that people could come in, but they're all ganged up, a bit like now with this COVID. With a gown and with a mask, and because of risk of infection, they don't want to give you anything. You couldn't see anyone who had a cold or anything like that. They weren't allowed in. My son, he was allowed in, but again, for a little boy coming in wearing a mask, well, it's not good, is it? And also seeing all the stuff going on, seeing your dad being ill and being sick. And also he had school to do. So, we were living in Warwick, which is about an hour or so from Oxford. He was at school. My wife's got a job. She's a solicitor in a firm of solicitors, Lodders in Stratford, a very busy, demanding role. And even though the employers are very supportive, she was with another employer at the time, and they were very supportive. She could take as much time as she wanted, but you don't, do you? Just, you want to do what you do and try and keep things as normal as possible. And in my case, I thought my job was to get out of there. But first, I was going to have this bone marrow transplant, and all I knew was that it's going to be 5 days if everything goes well. I mean, things could go wrong. I mean, what happens is they rely on somebody in Germany to come to have the procedure. They take their blood. That blood is like gold dust. I mean, that is my potential life. That's what I need. Well, can you believe it? Well, that's taken, I think, by volunteers on an aeroplane. I think it was was Hamburg or Frankfurt. I don't honestly know. Don't know any details. It was then shipped over, and then I still remember to this day the nurse walking on the ward and then coming into my room, and she said, "It's here. We've got it." And then she put it up on the drip, and she said it's a lot. I mean, they didn't know whether it was going to be enough. I don't know what enough was, but anyway, they said it's 3.5 litres. I thought, oh, great, that looks a lot, and then that needs to go in me. And so then obviously they're testing your blood pressure all the time, just to see that there isn't any reaction. And in my case, it normally apparently takes about 4 to 6 hours. Well, I was having a major temperature, I was having high blood pressure, so they had to stop it. This nurse, she was wonderful. She sat with me all that time through the night. I mean, can you imagine that? She had to have family to get home to, but she said, "No, I want to stay with you." I mean, the dedication of...
They're very good.
Oh, it fills me up just talking about the dedication of the nurses and the cleaning staff and the porters, everybody. It's incredible. And so eventually it went through me, and so you saw the last bit of the, and you're trying to get every drop into you, and it just goes in. And then if anyone had a blood transfusion or any liquids into them, they know, or platelets, and then that's it. Then they take the drip down, and then it's a waiting game, Lewis. You're on what they call day zero.
Yeah.
And day zero is really, it's like you started your life again. It's like I mean, it's very difficult to describe because your whole focus is on will these blood counts go up? And day zero is when you've got no immune system at all. You're very vulnerable. A lot of people just don't get to that stage. They don't get the opportunity. They don't get a donor. I was told I had about 30-40% chance of dying through the procedure.
That's quite high.
I didn't know this, but I've been told that with, and now I've gone into schools and colleges and universities and talked and tried to give potential donors the facts so that they can decide whether they want to register and be a potential donor and save someone. But I know now that only about I think it's one in three people who go through a transplant, whether it's during the process, during the procedure, or after the procedure. But within about 12 months, one in three die.
That's high again.
It's very high. I was told I had about 30-40% of dying just through the procedure because what happens is most people, they get an infection and the body can't fight that infection. Antibiotics won't work. They'll only work to a certain extent. But if you haven't got an immune system, you are relying on your immune system. And I'd do anything, a bit like now COVID. I mean, I know people take it seriously, and obviously the medics do, but a lot of people aren't taking it as seriously as they should. I mean, I was just paranoid about it. At home, for instance, I wasn't allowed anybody to visit, anyone with a cold, any pets. I mean, okay, if you got pets, you've got to obviously, carry on with that. But if someone came to the house, they'd have a gel. I mean, we didn't have any visitors. I didn't have any visitors. People assume that you're okay once you're out of hospital.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's when the hard work starts. It really does. It really does. So I was on day zero, and they won't let you out of hospital until your blood counts are at a safe level that you don't need readmitting. And in my case, the blood counts went up a little bit, but they weren't going up as much as I'd hoped. And so I was really worried. But they did let me out. It was I think I went in on something like the 5th of January, had the transplant on the 10th, was it 10th, 18th of January, I think it was. And then I came out just before my birthday. It was my birthday's on the 15th of February. And I remember thinking, will I get home to celebrate my birthday? For, what was it worth anyway? Just the fact that it's nice to be home, isn't it? And you feel just, but actually you're a burden. When you're at home, it's hard work, just getting up the stairs, down the stairs. People have got their lives to live. And you feel a bit of a burden, really. And I just thought, well, my priority is just really just sit about all day and try and get myself a bit fitter. While I was in hospital, I was doing, standing up. I couldn't do a proper press up. I'd just stand up and try and do a little press up. I'd also I didn't do squats or anything. That was out of the equation. Couldn't do a lunge. I was actually marching on the spot. And I used to keep myself a little diary, and I'd write down if it was the day, and I'd put something like, if I'd done 10 press ups, I'd put 10p. And then if I'd done marching on the spot, I might do it for 30 seconds, say on the hour, say 4 times a day or 3 times a day. But I was just so tired, Lewis. And I carried on that when I came out. I just had a little diary. So each day it was a little something that a sense of achievement.
Right. So that transplant, you got out of hospital. Once your recovery had got going, that transplant, unfortunately, was unsuccessful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it failed. I mean, I can still remember going, because what happened with me is the blood counts didn't go up enough that I didn't need blood transfusions and platelets. So I was I was able to drive. I don't know how I was able to drive myself, to be honest, but I was driving down to Oxford Churchill it was at this time. And I was requiring to have 3 times a week. Each time I was going in, I was having 3 bags of blood. and normally, say, one bag of platelets. My platelets have to be what's known as irradiated. I think I don't know much about it, but they were a special type of platelets, and so every week, and for about 9-10 weeks, I'd literally my life existed with basically going down 3 times a week, sitting there for about best part of I'll get there for say 8 o'clock. I get stuck in the traffic. If you know Oxford, it's really bad for traffic. And I get there to the hospital, and I'd hope that they'd got some blood. Some days they didn't have any blood, and you have to wait around. And there'd be other people there. Some people have been doing this for 10, 15 years, and you just sit around, and I'd have as I say, each week I'd have about 9 bags of blood and 1 or 2 bags of platelets if they were available. Um, but the reality was they didn't know what to do with me. And I remember the consultant having a chat with him, and he said, "I will get you better." And I always remember this, Dr. Tim Littlewood, super gentleman, and I trusted him, but I did start thinking, well, I had that transplant, it failed. How can you get me better?
Yeah.
He looked at the options, and he thought that it was the donor. We'd have to see if we can get another donor. Well, they've gone through all this search, international database, and they found two, but actually one couldn't make it, and one that they tried. So I thought, I was starting to think, my time's up. I've had it. I'm dying. I really did.
How do you stay mentally strong through that?
Uh,
Or as strong as you can be?
I don't know. I think the fact that um, you know, it, I don't really know how. Whether you blot it out, because it's a bit like a big monster that can take over your life, and you're paralyzed. You are really paralyzed if you allow that thought, because you just can't do anything, because you just think, what's the point? Why should I bother? And you might feel like a bit of a burden to society and a burden to your friends and family, and nobody really wants you. And what is it worth being around? And I mean, I actually went on it didn't really have any proper counselling in those days. I mean, the medics were superb, and there were people, but resources are so strapped, to be honest, in terms of any support apart from the life and death stuff, which is fantastic. And so I don't really know. I think a lot of that stemmed from perhaps my own childhood, just growing up, and also a lot of reading around positive thinking, um, positive mindset, and this inner belief that the subconscious is so important, and if you think negative thoughts and you think the worst, then it's almost encouraging those things to grow. Whereas if you think the positive things, it's like sowing little seeds. If it's gardening time now around spring, isn't it? Well, if you're about to sow your seeds and you haven't cleared out all the garden and all the rubbish and all the weeds, and then you allow those weeds to take over, you're not going to have a harvest. And it's the same in the mind. I'm a great believer that if you're thinking positively, you choose what you read about, you choose what you watch on TV, or nowadays you listen on podcasts. That's a choice, a personal choice, as opposed to react. And there's a great book which is a multi-million seller. I think something like 20 million sold. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, and I used to teach some of as part of some of our programs. We used a lot of his work. The 7 Habits, and the first habit, I can't remember the first is first things first.
Mm-hmm.
And first things first is think of yourself, get yourself in shape. A bit like you were saying, Lewis, health, number one. If you've got your health, you've got chances, you've got a possibility. If you haven't got your health, really tough. and you might start relying on other people. And we're all independent. No one's an island. However, you've got to, if you can do your bit, it makes it so much easier. And also, I think self-preservation comes in. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if you've gone through a major illness and you've got the nurses, I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to have a feeding tube. Whereas I know if things get so bad and you're not eating enough and you're not getting enough nutrients, you have to have a feeding tube. Now I didn't want that, and also if you can't get out of bed, there was a gentleman two rooms down. I remember, and he couldn't get out of bed. He came in again. He came in his football kit, and he'd had a knock, and he got him into hospital. And he was so physically, strong when he came in. I saw him. But within a few days, a few weeks, that same person was like just so weak and he couldn't get out of bed. So he had the nurses, washing him, cleaning him, go to the toilet. I didn't have that. I was lucky that I was able to do the basic physical things. And I suppose something was. I suppose it was pride more than anything. And I just thought, come on, Simon, it's down to me. And I think also I can draw strength from the fact that when I first went in, as a very youngish man, 26, 25, whatever it was, in 1991, I'd had that experience of being in hospital for 6 to 8 weeks and recovering. And I'd had it again in 2000. And so part of me was saying and kicking in, I don't want this to happen again. It's so bad. I don't want to have that ever again. When you've experienced something, whatever it is, a major trauma, you'll do anything, I think, to stop yourself from going into that situation again. Well, that's my view anyway.
Absolutely, I agree. So moving on to the second transplant, was it the same donor again?
Yeah, it was. I mean, what happened, Lewis, was the consultant, and I have to really admire his courage, because I think he was a bit of at a loss, because I asked him a question before I had a transplant, and this is a question I'd encourage anybody to ask who's going through any major illness. I asked him before I was about to have a transplant, because remember, in my case, it wasn't that desperate. They were almost taking the view, if you have your transplant now, your expectation of life is going to be a lot much better, and you could have normalcy in terms of life expectancy. However, if you don't have one, you'll be requiring blood transfusions, you'll get weak, and the chances are you might die. And it'd be too late to have a transplant, because you have to be reasonably healthy to have the transplant.
Yeah.
In some cases, they won't give you the transplant. And so in my case, I asked the consultant, what would you do? Would you have the transplant? I was still going to work. I was a bit of jogging, but I was starting to get weak again, very weak. So I knew the writing was on the wall. And he said to me, well, do you know what? I think you'll look back in 3 or 4 months and think, what was all the fuss about? Those are the exact words he said. I think you'll look back in 3 or 4 months and think, what was all the fuss about? Now, those comments to me at the time were uplifting, because I thought, I'll go in and have this transplant, I'll come out and recover, and in 3 to 4 months, I'll be back at work, I'll be back playing a sport, life's good. So why wouldn't I? I've got the assurance from a top consultant that life's going to be good. Yes, I was given I had to sign a form to say about the risk.
Yeah.
But I didn't really think, and it never really entered my mind too much, I'm going to die. I didn't really think, do you know what? Actually, it might not work. I was just thinking, well, let's get in here, let's get on with it. And if it doesn't work, well, there's not a lot I can do about it anyway. It's outside my control. So The consultant, after it hadn't worked, and he was thinking perhaps we need a new donor, I was referred to the top specialist, a lady called Professor Judith Marsh at King's College London, King's College Hospital, which is one of the top places in the world. And she is the leading expert on aplastic anemia. And I went to see Judith, as I call her, lovely lady, and she's told me that I've been lucky, just to get through the procedure. But she said it wasn't the donor. The donor's a good match. We need to stick with the donor if they're prepared to come forward again. But it was your conditioning. Your conditioning. We need to change the conditioning. Now, she didn't say it was the wrong conditioning, but when I came out there, I was very angry indeed, because can you imagine? I'd just been through hell and back, all that suffering, all that time, and putting my life on the line to something which really, if she was involved first time, there was a better chance. But the fact was, it would have never worked, and she told me that. And and to this day, I suppose I'm thinking, crikey, how could someone make that decision? But the consultant, in fairness to the consultant, followed the UK guidelines. They were the guidelines at the time. He didn't know this extra information that it's such a complex thing. And she said, well, actually, yeah. And in fairness, I'd been given the option. I had been told, would you like your transplant in Oxford or would you like your transplant at King's? And I said, what was the difference? And I was told, well, there won't be any difference. It's just which is more convenient for you, which would you prefer? Knowing that King's is the specialist area. And I just said, well, Oxford, because it's more local. I might, more chance from a visitor. If I get a visitor, then it's easier for them. So I thought, well, if I go to London, which is 3 hours away, driving potentially or on the train, then I might not have anyone see me, and I'll be in 6-8 weeks at least. Because they tell you you're likely to be in. I know someone was in about 3 weeks now, but it could be 6-8 weeks, it could be 3-4 weeks, it could be months. I know someone was in for a whole year and who had, I think, three transplants. So you don't know. So I chose Oxford, and in good faith, and I'm glad I did. But then I was set to go to King's, and I went in. Oh, I had my chemo again. And thankfully the new donor, not the new donor, so the previous donor, I don't know anything about that person. All I know, I did sneak my notes one day when the nurse was out and she'd left the file. I thought, as you do, I'm so inquisitive, I suppose, a bit nosy really. And I thought, right, I'll have a look. And I had a look, and all it said was, I think it was 24-year-old male German donor. That's all I got to know. And I can't thank that person enough. I've never met them or anything, but they saved my life. And anyway, and then it was the 10th of July, 2012, that again, and this time the nurse came in, and I always remember it. And previously it was, bear in mind that the bone marrow was 3.5 bags, 3.5 litres of blood. She came in and she said, there's not really that much here. There's only about 1.5 litres. And straight away I thought, bloody hell, I've had it. Last time it was 3.5, and it failed. This time it's about 1.5 litres. It's not a lot, is it? Do you know what I mean? And there was that doubt, and oh dear. And then you just sit there. This time it took about 4 or 5 hours to go through my system, and it was day zero again, and off we go.
The determination to go again has to come back.
Yeah. And my blood counts started coming up gradually, very gradually. I used to go to King's College. I couldn't go on public transport. I was told not to go on public transport because of risk of infection. So they arranged for some transport. And anyway, I was very thankful. But I had no idea half the time what time this transport was going to pick me up. it could be 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning or 7, and I had to get down there, and there'd be, say, someone from Anglesey or somewhere like that, and they'd be in the same car with me. And the idea was that we were meant to, avoid any infection, and then we'd pick someone up, say, in Northampton, and then on the way back we do, similar. Long days, but anyway, and then, then my count started coming up, and actually in my case, I was so lucky, Lewis, because when I was in hospital, we had tickets. It was 2012. It was the London Olympics. There was a buzz around London. I can still remember, the flame, the torch.
Yep.
Yeah. That goes around the country. Well, whilst I was in hospital, the torch, they came past King's College and they were going outside. Well, my window I had a little window, which was over the car park. I didn't see anything, but I remember a lot of excitement. But we had tickets. We had tickets for the Super Saturday, tickets for the 100 metres.
The big day.
Usain Bolt, right? And when I first went into hospital, I remember speaking to Michelle Kenyon, a lovely lady. She's the bone marrow coordinator nurse. And I said to her, bearing in mind I was going in early July, I said, what's the chances of me getting out for the Olympics? And she looked at me and she said, no chance. And so whilst I was in, my main driver was, I'm going to get in. And even while I was in, I watched, it brings tears to my eyes now, I watched Rowan Atkinson. I don't know, it's beyond you. You weren't even born, I don't think. Oh, you were born, weren't you? I don't know where you saw it. He was messing about playing the piano, and it was the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
And I was watching. I was so tired though. I couldn't watch it all. I had a little TV in my room, and I watched it, a bit of it, and I got onto the London Olympics. I'd volunteered actually to be a ambassador, and I'd been accepted to be an ambassador for the London Olympics as a volunteer, but I couldn't do it because of obviously risk of infection. The consultant said, no, you can't do it. I suppose it's me, setting high goals, and I wanted to, just be part of something special in London. I thought, well, they're never going to be there again in my lifetime. Last time was in, 1946 or something. And so I couldn't do that. But I had tickets. And I was so excited. We got them through the ballot. And I got on to the Olympics, and I said, is there any chance? I'm in a hospital. I'm having a transplant. I got on to the organisers. They were fantastic, the organisers. And they said, yeah, we'll get you, if you can get to Stratford, where the Olympics were, the stadium, we'll arrange for security for you to drive, you and your wife to drive, and your son to drive through. Because in those days, they had almost like a lockdown with the transport system. And they said, we'll arrange for your security. We'll also get a golf cart, because I wasn't physically able to walk particularly well at all, to the stadium and get you to the seat. And so we went down there, we drove down there, and we went straight through, right next to the stadium. And I remember them saying, do you need and I was fortunate, I was able to walk. And I can still remember it to this day, walking to the stadium. Obviously, you have to go through security. The armed forces are there, fantastic, the soldiers. And our seats were the highest seats in the stadium. They were right at the top of the seating, but it was wonderful.
That'll get your fitness back.
And that day, to this day, I think I've still got a video clip of when they played the national anthem. It was great. And so, me and sport, we just fall in love with each other. I just love it. Sport's just fantastic.
We'll move on to that now then. So after that thankfully successful transplant, how long did it take you to regain your fitness again afterwards and get back to the sports we're going to come on to today, running, golf and tennis?
Well, I think how long? I think in terms of, I'd set myself each day little goals. I reckon it was really about 12 months to 18 months, I couldn't walk to the phone box, which is only, 300 yards away. So I just, again, set myself little targets. I started walking. I carried on with, it was a fantastic physio who's a friend of ours, Sarah Reeves in Sheffield, who works at the NHS, looks after about 50 physios. And she said, do lunges. So I started doing lunges, and I couldn't do one to begin with. And I worked up, and after about 6 months, I was doing 50 lunges on each leg every day. I had nothing else to do. I wasn't going back to work. I couldn't because of risk of infection. My mission was just to get myself fit and healthy. I was lucky that, we had money coming in. We had a roof over our head. We just actually moved to Warwick, which is a lovely place. And we had we could have lost everything. Could have lost the house, everything. And then I started jogging. I went to park run. I went as a volunteer to begin with because I couldn't run it, and I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. Now I could go to park run because that was outside.
Right.
I couldn't go to a restaurant. Couldn't go to a pub. Couldn't go shopping. Couldn't go for a meal because I might get infection. I used to carry a gel with me if there was a knife and fork. If I was out, I went. I didn't go to other people's houses, anything like that. But I started jogging. I started going to the park run. I was doing press ups each day. I joined a gym. Everyone active as it is now, fantastic. So very supportive. I couldn't go swimming. Wasn't allowed to go swimming. I was on all these drugs. I was on about 40 tablets or equivalent a day. I was on steroids to boost my system. I was most probably like, a man possessed because once you're on steroids, you do have an extra kick in you. But I gained weight as well. I put on an extra 3 stone. I was up to about 15 stone, whereas normally I'm about 11 stone. And but I'd entered the Warwick Half Marathon, and my wife thought I was bonkers. And also I entered to go in the London Marathon to run it for charity for Anthony Nolan because they'd saved my life. I wanted to give something back, and so within about I think it was I had the transplant in July, and then the following that was 2012. It was the following. No, it was about 18 months, almost over 18 months. I did the Warwick Half Marathon. I'd done the park run. Initially I did it in about 28 minutes. I couldn't get up the hill. And then I started getting about 25 minutes, started jogging all of it. And then I did the Warwick Half Marathon in March 2014. And my wife, I remember Jane, lovely. She was unbelievable to even stick with me. I don't know. But, she said, just don't go mad. And but I trained properly. I'd done the London Marathon 6 times before. You can't take things lightly. You've got to get your nutrition right, get your sleep right, rest right, and I did that in a time of I think it was about 1:38, which is
Quite quick.
pretty good. And then I had the London Marathon, 13th of April 2014. Filling up, just talking about it. One of the best days of my life. And I ran that in 3 hours, 13 minutes, 57 minutes, I think, 57 seconds.
That is very quick. Isn't the target's normally under 4 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you run it all, you should do it under about 4.5 hours. I think most people are under 5 hours. Club runners, most club runners most people under 4 hours, say club runners, good runners, really good runners, elite, under 3 hours. Pretty, decent club runners nowadays. Anything under 3.5 is pretty good. And life was good, fantastic. I was back working then, and but only 6 weeks later, Lewis, I thought, well, I'll give my legs a rest. I won't do the running so much, recover. And I raised, I don't know how much it was, about £3,500 for Auntie Nona. Well, that was nothing compared to the transplant. It cost about £100,000 for a transplant, apparently, from not a sibling match. And then I got smashed off my bicycle. Literally, I'm not a big cyclist, but I got smashed off my bicycle on a lovely day in May. May the 14th. You always remember these things, don't you? You always remember dates. It's a bit like people quitting smoking. They always remember it. I never smoked in my life. But it was May the 14th. I got smashed off. I was left for dead. I woke up. I'd been knocked out. Someone had hit me apparently at 50, 60 miles an hour on just a normal A road, only about a mile from home, and driven off. And I woke up and I was in one of those neck braces.
Mhm.
There was an ambulance there. I can still see it. Two people looking at me said, "You've been involved in an accident. Don't move your head. We'll get you to hospital." And I honestly thought I'd be paralysed for the rest of my life. I thought to myself, crikey, I've had this transplant. I'm now being knocked off my bike, rushed into hospital, blue light and all that. They'd ripped my shirt open, put all those little bits on so that they can test your oxygen levels and heart and all that. And I mean, it was so coincidental, but the chap who was in charge of A&E, Atta, he lived opposite us. And he said, "What are you doing here?" and then he made sure I had all the tests and everything. I went under one of them tunnels and they did the scan and all that, CT scan. And it may be me, I'm daft as a brush. He said, and actually the paramedic at the time, she said to me, "You've been so lucky. It's because you were so fit, we reckon, that nothing's broken and that I was in a bad way. I mean, my shoulder was, badly bruised and my ribs and all that, and I could hardly walk and I was bent over, but nothing had been broken." And he said to me after, he said, "Look, I hadn't even rang my wife, Jane. Anyway, so I rang and told her, and he said, "Look, you're better off not staying in because there weren't any beds in the hospital. I'd have been in a corridor." He said, "You're better off going home. You live opposite us. If anything happens during the night, let us know." And then I started physio for, well, it was about a year having physio because, as you may know, if you have a major impact, the muscles kick in and protect themselves, and it
Yeah.
takes a while to protect yourself. And what happened with me is Anthony Nolan kept in touch, and they said there's this Transplant Games. It's the first ever time Anthony Nolan, as an organisation and stem cell, is being recognised, and there's these British Transplant Games. I didn't know anything about them, and then I read and found out that they started about 40 years ago, and it all started to encourage people to really get back into sport. And I thought, fantastic. So I went up to, and I was really nervous, and I thought, oh, these people have had a transplant. What's it going to be like? And I thought, well, I'd played golf in the past and football. Football didn't happen at the Transplant Games at the time, and I thought I'd do a bit of running. I wasn't a sprinter, as you know, I'd done a half marathons, good endurance, but the longest distance was 5K. So I thought, well, I'll do the 5K and I'll do the 1500 metres. That'll be enough. Going up to Newcastle, I'd got myself fit again. And it was fantastic. Met all these amazing people, little kiddies running, doing, say, 10 yards or something. Had a lung transplant, heart transplant, kidney, all these, hundreds of people, all the parents, a few spectators. It was just magnificent. Being with people and sharing their story, listening to their stories. And I thought, I was representing Anthony Nolan, and it was at Gateshead Stadium, where Steve Cram was, top athlete, and other top athletes had run, and and there was me. And I remember going into the changing rooms beforehand, and it said there was something like about drug tests or something, and I thought, well, I wouldn't pass that because I was on this medication still. And but I went there and I won. I won the 1500 meters and the 5K, and I felt like an Olympic champion. I really did. And that set me off on this Transplant Games, and I thought, this is fantastic. So then I thought, and it's every year, and then I thought, well, I'll do this again. And then I started doing the golf. Take my golf clubs, went up to Liverpool, and I won won the golf, I won the 1500 again, and I won the 5K again. And I thought, I love this.
Before we come on to any more on the Transplant Games, just want a couple of anonymous listener questions, marathon themed. If anyone does want to submit any listener questions, if you follow the Transplants Take on Sport social media pages, Facebook and Instagram are at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter is at TTOS Pod. So a couple in now. Just thought before we get too far into the Transplant Games, we'll get these marathon questions done, and then we can talk more about the British, European, and World Games and your sports. So, first one. What does the application process involve for the London Marathon? What's the sort of criteria, if there is any?
Well, for the London Marathon, it operates on a ballot system.
Right.
So what happens is it's around the time of the London Marathon. Normally, it's in April. Normally in April. At the moment with COVID, it's going to be in October because everything was pushed back. And I think they're doing a virtual London Marathon this time round, so people have registered and are doing it virtually, submitting their times. But there will be some elite runners, similar to last year. There were some elite runners. I think they went around St James's Park. Normal events would be after the London Marathon, about the next 2 or 3 days, they release an opportunity to apply. And you apply, and it normally costs about £40-50. And you can put whether you donate your, if you don't get in, whether you donate to charity or not, your money.
Right.
If you do get in, and it's a very rare chance that you will get in. If you get in, I mean, I applied, believe it or not, the London Marathon started in 1981, and I applied every year for that, and I never got in. And in all the times I've applied about 20 times, and I've ever once got in. Each time I've gone through a running club that I've been a member of, because they sometimes have 1 or 2 places. So if you're an existing member of a running club, they normally have a 1 or 2 places, and they normally raffle them off or decide who's the best person to have it. And then there's also charity places. So if anyone seriously wants to do it and they've got a charity that's close to their heart, they will always normally get a place. Charities buy places called golden bond places. And I think they have to pay about £500 for these places. So most charities now insist that you need to raise a certain amount of money to make it worth their while. And obviously, it's a great opportunity to promote the charity and do your bit. And so it's normally about £2,000 or it could be £3,000 that you're expected to raise. And in my case, the first time I did it for Ashley Nolan, and I got a what's known as a golden bond place, and they're fantastic. All the charities are fantastic. They will support you. They will help you through your training program. They might even have times where they'll have, in this case with COVID, they might have a virtual events. If things ease, they might have the odd event where you all get together. Those people are training together. And it really is a great way to do it. The London Marathon itself, applying for, is something that you've got to think about seriously if you're going to do it. And I would recommend that you don't do what most people do. They might have a beer in the pub or something and think, right, I'll do that London Marathon. And then they'll start training in, say, the December or the January, and it's in April. You really need to have a good plateau, a good underlying level of fitness before entertaining it. And I would recommend that you're able to do at least a half marathon, and ideally 15 miles that you can run comfortably without any major problems. Unless you want to walk it, but have a think about the officials and the volunteers, because they have to be out there for many hours. And if you're out there for more than 5 hours, then they're out there through rain, snow, and it has snowed in April, and it has chucked you down. It's a long time. So if you can get round a bit quicker than that, then that's really going to help people.
And the other question is, would you ever consider running an Ironman?
Do you know what? Yeah, I would. And in my younger days, we went to we've got a friend who was working in Cape Town, and we went to the I went and ran in 1998. I ran before my transplant. That was 1998. I ran the Cape Town Half Marathon, and my friend Archie ran the marathon, and it was fantastic. And whilst I was there, they run an event called the Comrades, which is about 55 miles, and they also do the Two Oceans, which is about 35 miles. And I was really into endurance running, and I thought, well, I'm going to do that one day. But as things have moved on, and my thoughts have changed, I love triathlon, and I had a go at triathlon. I did an open water triathlon. I'm rubbish at swimming. I mean, I can swim, but I'm not really good at swimming. And I did breaststroke for the swim. It was only about 750 meters in Blenheim, the Blenheim Lake there, and I've done 3 or 4 triathlons, but the Ironman is just a different kettle of fish. I mean, you've got to run a marathon after you've cycled something like, is it 100 miles or 100k?
I think so. We were talking about it with Hannah Owen, who was on here before, as a live donor, doing just triathlons.
And then of course, you need to do the swim. It's like a mile swim, and so um, I do pride myself on prioritizing my health, and I do actually think that just undertaking that, it's a full-time job. You've got to be training most probably the best part of 30, 25 to 30 hours a week,
It must take a lot.
and I actually think that most people, and this is including myself when I used to, prior to my transplant, vastly underestimate the magic of sleep and rest. And when you're going through any illness, the one thing that often is affected most is what? Sleep. And so if you're not getting quality sleep, you don't recover quickly, and you don't recover as quickly as anyway, the older you get. So if you're doing anything or even contemplating that, I would say think about it. Start off slowly. If you're going to do an Ironman or thinking of that, then build up the respective distances and make sure that you know what you're undertaking, because you don't want to be in a situation. And I know people have done this. They've done a marathon, and this is only starting off, and then they haven't ran for another 12 months, or they haven't been able to run ever again. They've damaged the knee, and that's the thing. You don't want to be in a situation, because it's the joy, isn't it? It's the joy of doing these things and the buzz you get and the camaraderie, and you want to still do that and stay healthy and enjoy them.
So we'll come back onto the Transplant Games now and the sport you've played involved with transplant sport. We've mentioned the running, that you've won several medals at the World Games, the European Games, the British Games. We'll move on to the golf.
Yeah.
Did you play competitively before your transplant?
Yeah, I did. I was very lucky as a youngster. I mean, I didn't really take it very seriously, but I was a member of a club when I was 15 up in Cheshire called Prestbury, which is a fantastic club. And I played with my dad, and I was very lucky. He's a very keen golfer. And then when it was prior to my transplant, I moved down to Oxford, and I was a member. I was playing off a handicap of 9, and I was playing 2 or 3 times a week. Previously, I played a lot of football, but I packed the football in playing for a club because I was getting the knocks, and also I was away from home. Whereas I felt golf was just a natural progression. You get to about 30 odd, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Took it seriously. But then when I had my transplant, I had a complete break. Joining a golf club is quite a commitment financially. And so I didn't really get into it at all for a number of years. And then the Transplant Games came up, and actually I thought to myself, do you know what? I think I'll have a game of golf. And so that gave me the impetus, and to think, right, I need to, because you need to have a proper handicap to play in the golf competition at the British Transplant Games. You can't just turn up. And so I joined a club and had to get my handicap going again. And I was useless. I was absolutely useless. But there's obviously something there because I had the fundamentals. But when you start something again, it doesn't come that easily. I mean, I as a youngster, and perhaps people can relate to this, you just do things and you don't think about it. Once you have to start thinking about it, things don't work properly. It's harder. and I didn't used to have lessons. I mean, maybe occasional lessons, but I started to have lessons, and it wasn't really getting much better. But I think I started off at the Transplant Games. I had a handicap of 21. And I remember having a chat with my dad, and he says, "Yeah, and you got 21? I mean, what's up with you?" You know, but I was struggling to play off it, the course that I joined. And then I got a bit better, and I played in the Transplant Games, and I won in the second division, I think it was. I only got 34 points. I mean, if you play to your handicap, you get 36. But I think I got about 34 points or something and won it. I thought, oh, this is good. And then I played in Malaga in the World Games. Didn't do particularly well. But it doesn't matter, does it? Golf's a great social sport. It really is.
It does seem to be when that you're out walking around. If you're playing with friends, you can talk to them as you go around. Have you managed to get many rounds in over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, with all of the restrictions, being restricted. But what's been great, I've joined Leamington Golf Club, super golf clubs, a super setup. It's only 5 minutes from my house. I mean, I walked there yesterday just to walk around the course with a friend, and my wife's joined as well. And so after the first lockdown, when the weather was really nice, well, you couldn't do a lot really, could you? So we used to play 9 holes, most evenings, just pop off because golf was lifted. I mean, it is a strange one because in England, at the moment you can't play golf, but in Scotland they carried on all the way through. And perhaps we should learn something from the Scots, So yeah, I mean, I started playing, and I normally play at least say once a week, and really enjoy it. I think therapeutically as well. It's I know they say it's a good walk spoiled, and it is a frustrating game, but you can't take life too seriously. I mean, when you've had a transplant, every day's a bonus. That's how I look at it. I mean, like today, it's Friday, and I just think fantastic. I'm feeling good. Went for a walk around the park. I feel great, and to not be in pain each and every day is fantastic because I know so many people who are in pain, and to not be on medication. And in my case, we haven't talked about it, but I've been medication free for over 6 years now. I went completely against the doctors and consultants' advice. I worked with them, but I've studied and studied nutrition, and something inside me was saying to me, and I remember the consultant that I saw, Victor, who was a Spaniard, super chap. He said to me, "You won't get better, Simon, unless you flood your body with 4 times nutritionally dense food than you think you can get in your body, and that is humanly possible." And I came out of the room thinking, "What on earth's he on about?" And that's why I've just studied and studied in nutrition. And so I only really eat nutritionally dense foods, not energy dense foods, and I've studied nutrition ever since I was first diagnosed in 1991. And I think nutrition and sleep are just the blind spots for people in life, and many people. And also, we're seeing that in sport now, aren't we? We're seeing the top sports people look at the marginal gains.
Yeah.
They're looking. I read about Manchester United. Alex Ferguson was one of the first to take his players off abroad at winter to make sure their vitamin D levels were sufficient. And David Boreman with cycling, looking for the marginal gains, that little 1% that makes the big difference. They even take their mattresses, the cyclists, abroad to improve their sleep. And people like Paula Radcliffe, she learned from the Kenyans. Mo Farah, I've read his book, how he was a failure. Mo Farah was one of the biggest failures in his early days. They always thought he'd never make it. He didn't take it seriously enough. He wanted to be a footballer, if you read his autobiography. But when they realised, and he had to live with the Kenyans, and he started realising what they did, he got better. And he realised they go for a run in the morning, and they don't then do jobs for the rest of the day. They sit around, have a cup of tea, have a sleep, and then they go again. And if you eat and breathe like a winner, you too have a much better chance of becoming a winner. And and I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's this winning mentality. If you want to be a winner, be around winners. You know, if you want to be a loser, stay with the losers. You know, you need to get away from the people who are dragging you down, giving you bad vibes. And that's something I've taken, and I encourage my son and encourage other people to do. You know, it's a tough call sometimes, especially when you've got friends, but anything negative, it's like a cancer. You can use it in your favor, you know, as an obstacle, but why not see something as an opportunity? Always look for the opportunities, always look for the possibilities. And it's about the more, my whole approach is, it's not about whether it's a bad or a good experience. It's about learning from every experience, and it's about having as many experiences as possible. And you have so much freedom to make those choices. In other countries, we don't have a lot of those freedoms. Does this make sense, Lewis?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and it's, you know, I've been to, for instance, last year I went to Pakistan. There were the army and the police on virtually every, you know, corner in the city. You know, you go to China, other places. What we've got in this country and in some other countries is even though, you know, some people will moan about things. You know, I'm not interested in moaners. My approach is, it's down to it's down to you. It's down to you individually, and it's down to me. If it's to be, it's up to me. And in life, you either get excuses or results. You can't get both. It's that simple. Don't make excuses. Make progress. I suppose this is where my learnings, and I suppose learning about other people and different philosophies, and it's all about good habits. Good daily habits stick, and they're easy to live with. Bad habits like smoking, drinking too much, addiction, they are all encompassing. And if you're in that situation, you can't see the wood from the trees. You can't make rational decisions. And that's not blaming someone. They need help. And the first stage of an alcoholic is always what? You can't help an alcoholic until Alcoholics Anonymous will say this. You know, first stage is 12 steps. The first step is step one is to accept the situation you're in. And step 12 is to help others. And you can't get healed unless you go to step 12, helping others. So I think where I'm coming from, my passion is if I can help other people, if I can inspire other people, if I can, even if it's a little thing. I've started this daily minute. Lewis, you heard about that?
Yeah, well, that's on my list to come on to. We may as well do it now, actually.
Yeah, well, the Daily Minute was something which last year I went on a webinar. I mean, we're all in lockdown. We couldn't do anything. We were all paralysed, weren't we? We were all experiencing what people go through in a transplant, where you're stuck, you know, or if you're ill, you can't go out. You know, you're trapped. And if you're fit and healthy, you really most probably fight against that, or you try and channel your energies in a positive way and discover new things. And in my case, I went on a webinar which was led by the NHS mental health lead for safeguarding, Kenny Gibson, and also Suzanne Gardner, who heads up sporting and wellbeing. And they gave presentations. And also there was a lady who I can't remember from sporting and from swimming wellbeing. And they all gave fantastic presentations. There was about 100 health professionals on this. And I was invited to go on this, and I was honoured to be invited. And I listened to their presentations, and they were talking about the anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide, and all the horrible things that have been going on during lockdown, mental health issues, and all the clubs and societies and sports clubs have been decimated by the impact of COVID. And after that, I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do? You know, I can't do anything. I'm restricted. But what could I do? And so I started, you know, I was thinking the power of sport, the power of exercise. So I thought, well, why don't? And I had a chat with my son Ed, who's fantastic. He's 20 now. And he said, you know, and I said, why don't I do this minute? So I'm just doing a minute of exercise. And that's all it is. It started off on a journey. I started on day one, a bit like the transplant. It was day 0, day 1. And I just started it, and it's just 3 different exercises. It was initially, it was some tuck jumps and squat jumps and lunges, and I did them for each 20 seconds, and then I pulled my calf actually, so I had to change the round. So then you think, well, I'll do something different. So I did some press ups. The idea is, though, Lewis, it's about if you can get your heart rate accelerated, even if it's for 60 seconds, it's been proven scientifically. That's the equivalent of doing like a 45-minute, say, cycle or easy jog. So you've got to get your heart rate elevated. And what it does, it boosts those endorphins and it makes you feel good. So it's not just the physical side, it's just the mental side. You feel great. So you do it. You have to really push yourself perhaps to get going. And that's the hardest thing with anything, isn't it? It's that energy to get started and to think, right, I'm going to do something different, make a change. And it's so simple. And it reminded me when I was in hospital, just thinking, I've got to get up. I've got to get out of bed. I've got to have a shower. I've got to get changed. Have I got any clean clothes? Have I got any boxer shorts? I couldn't have a shave half the time. When I did have a shave, I want to feel good. You want to look good, and you've got personal pride. And I had my hair all dropped out or anything. But, those little things press us against the wall, And so now I've just carried on. And initially I did it, I was I reaching out to local sports clubs. So I was trying to promote, say, for instance, Warwick Hockey Club, and I'd wear the hockey outfit. I'd wear Warwick hockey top. I support Wolves, so I'd wear the Wolves top and do football, and hold a football or rugby. I like Coventry Rugby Club. I've done some work with them, on the performance side and some of their players and the coaches. And so, I promoted rugby. So I was trying to reach out. I'm rubbish on social media. If you can help Lewis with this, I'm absolutely useless. I'll post it on.
We could share a few on the Transplants Take on Sport pages.
And I'll post it on my Twitter site, which is at Perkin Simon, and I'll put it on my Facebook. But, I'm not very good at that. I need some help there. But I just do it now, and I just carried on doing it, and people seem to like it. And I mean, I've had some lovely messages from people. One lady, she lost 4 stone, and she just started it, and then she started walking, and then she started jogging, and then she started paying attention to her nutrition. I've been on the Radio Coventry and Warwickshire, BBC Coventry and Warwickshire. There's a lovely lady, Trish, who does the afternoon show, Trisha Doodoo. She's got me on there. She needs to get going on it, Trish does. She keeps stopping and starting, and she keeps saying she's fallen off. But it's all about, do you want it? If you want it, it's there for you. All the answers are there. We can do so much more than we think's possible, and it's finding what works for people. It's not for everyone. It's like anything, isn't it? Find what works for you, have fun, enjoy it, and life's good.
I think people will find your videos and the way you've spoken today useful. So we'll move on to our final sport of this record, which is tennis. Have you been playing at a decent standard throughout your life?
No, I mean, when I grew up, tennis was, it's elite sport, to be honest. I mean, I think we had a couple of tennis courts. I went to a good school. It used to be a grammar school, but it was a comprehensive when I went there. We didn't play tennis at school. No one, I think one girl was a member of a tennis club when I was at school. Our school, we had about 1,000 people there. And not many people were members of tennis clubs in those days. I mean, we're going back to the 70s, 80s. But I joined Warwick Boat Club when I moved to Warwick. And that's a fantastic facility. It really is first class. It's got tennis, it's got rowing, and it's got squash and bowls. And I started playing tennis. And actually, do you know why I started tennis, Lewis? The reason I started tennis is I couldn't really do much else. And I went to play tennis, and we played doubles. And it was quite sociable. I was really missing the social connection and, being with other people. So I could turn up on, say, a Tuesday morning. I didn't have to exert myself too much. I mean, if you play doubles tennis with people who are in the 60s and 70s, so it was great and it was good fun and it was safe. I wasn't having a chance of infection or anything. And then I saw these transplant games and actually, perhaps I'm a bit tight, let's say. And there were the transplant games in Sardinia in Europe. And I thought, well, I'm not paying EasyJet or Ryanair about 100 quid to take my golf clubs to Sardinia. I'll do the tennis. So I thought, right, I've got to get myself decent at tennis, half decent. So I had a few lessons with Marcus Willis, who ended up playing actually at Wimbledon and got to the second round about 4 or 5 years ago. I played Summarise. He got knocked out, but he's a great guy, and he gave me some lessons. And Gavin Henderson, who's the coach there at Warwick Boat Club, and he was great. And so I play, but I'm not particularly any good. I'm average really. I'm not a club player or anything. I'm not good enough. But I don't mind. I mean, who cares? Who cares what you like?
As long as you enjoy it.
I love it. It's a sociable game, and again, it's a game which you can play any age. There's people there who are in their. I mean, there's been people in the 90s playing tennis, and the same with golf. And I'm I suppose at a stage I'm 56. I mean, I just think every day is a bonus. My parents were told they never get to 40 or 50 anyway. And look at me, I'm so lucky. Every day really is magic. Today the sun's out. I'm going to go for a walk. I can potter about. I'll be making some phone calls for a support group, COVID Warwick and Leamington support group, where I'm ringing people actually who are in a really terrible situation, and they just need. A lot of people are so lonely. They've got no family. They've got no one to talk to. It's terrible. So and I just think that if there's so many kind people out there, there's so many really superb people. I mean, Lewis, the transplant community. You've got people like Lynn Holt, who's devoted her life to people who've had transplants as a heart transplant coordinator. And now she's masterminding and leading the transplant games. Simon Elmore with the transplant family. He's there, bringing the kiddies and the parents together. It's fantastic. There's so many kind people. I could go on and on. Inspirational people in all walks of life. I was watching the chap on BBC this morning. Mark, his name is, soldier, blown up. He's got no legs. He's only got one arm. What's he doing today? He's running 5K. I mean, you just hats off to all people, isn't it?
Absolutely. The transplant community is great. If anyone wants to hear from Simon Elmore, his episode with me is, I think it's the third one we did, so you can look back in the list of podcasts for that. And listeners, you'll be hearing from Lynn very shortly. So Simon, it's been great to talk to you today. I've learned a lot about bone marrow transplants, and all the things you've been through is inspiring. I think people will take a lot from it. So a couple more questions before we go. I appreciate it's been a long one today. Could you summarise your proudest moments in sport post-transplant?
Post-transplant, undoubtedly, I think my proudest moment, I'm getting emotional saying it, my proudest moment was finishing the London Marathon, because and why my wife was there, Jane, love her to bits, and I was running for Anthony Nolan, and they're the people who saved my life. The organisation was fantastic. There's so many proud moments, but just to do that, and the marathon is such a test. I know the Ironman we talked about is a test, but there was that. But also in the transplant community, winning that first, I think like your first medal, winning that 1500 meters. I just sprinted. I was running around the track at Gateshead. It was a bit wet. I can remember it vividly. There was quite a big crowd in the stadium there, and I just thought, it's now or never. And I just went, and I went so fast. I felt like a man possessed, and I won. And I can't even remember the crowd or anything, but I won, and I pulled my calf. I didn't realise I pulled it, and then afterwards I could hardly walk, and we were going on holiday, walking holiday in Cornwall, and I was a right wreck. I was a complete letdown, but I wasn't bothered. That sense of winning, and again in Malaga. I mean, Malaga running for Great Britain. And I won the 5K in Malaga, and there were a number of us, and we were the Team GB won, and John Moore, who you must interview, he's a powerhouse. He won the 5K, and there are all these people from all over the world there together, all friends together, but so competitive when it comes to it, because we all want to do our bit. We want to win. Everyone wants to be surrounded by winners and be a winner. And Danny as well, young lad, first transplant games, I think it was the World Games, Scottish lad. And we won as a team. And as a team, I think that for me, it's this team aspect, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be part of a team and something bigger than themselves. And that's what I love.
That is the key to it. The team, you get the camaraderie, you get that sort of family of people who know what you've been through and they can all sympathise with you, empathise. Final question before we go, and it's one I asked to everyone who's been on before. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a transplant?
I think the most important thing is to really think to yourself, this is a fantastic opportunity. It's a fantastic, really is the gift of life. It's magical. And yes, you'll be worried sick. Yes, it might go wrong. Yes, it's quite unreasonable to have tears, emotions, but the possibilities are unbelievable. What it can give you, and you will have setbacks. Everybody has setbacks. I had setbacks. I was readmitted to hospital. But when you've got no option, and I had no option the second time round, no option at all. It's the only option. Embrace it and look after yourself and educate yourself. Talk to other people who have gone through a similar thing. Don't be afraid to ask any question, even if you think it's a silly question, it's been asked before. There's loads of other people around you who have been through that, and they will help you. And if they don't, if you ask someone and they don't give you, then don't stop. Ask somebody else. Surround yourself with positivity, and above all else, invest in your health. Learn how to stay healthy. Learn about sleep, the power of sleep, nutrition, rest, and recovery. And don't ever worry about what anyone else says about you, how you look, how you appear. Don't spend ages on your phone. Social media can work wonders, but equally, it can be terrible and debilitating. What's most important is, as you said, Lewis, I think, and other guests, I'm sure, is your health, because with your health, you have all the things and the possibilities. Without it, you don't. And then it becomes you start depending on others and life gets tougher. So that would be my message. I know it's a long one, but I think it's such an important one because having a transplant is, let's face it, is amazing. And not everybody gets that opportunity. And that's why I urge, if you're having one, to talk to others and talk to friends, and particularly in the sense of registering for stem cell and bone marrow, encourage other people to not only register for that, but also for blood donation as well, because there's a massive shortage of blood donators throughout the UK and throughout the world. And I've had about 300 bags of blood, and I wouldn't be here today without all the support of all the medical staff and family and all those donors, whether it's blood, stem cell, or organ donors, are fantastic.
I think you've summed it up brilliantly there with some fantastic advice. Simon, thank you very much for coming on and having a chat today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I've learnt a lot, and I'm sure the listeners will too. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you go and subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen. That could be Apple, Google, Spotify, Acast, Amazon, wherever it normally is. Here we go. Little task for you. If there's anybody in your house, friend, relative, whoever that may be, they're not familiar with podcasts, they don't have a podcast app, they're not sure what a podcast is, and you can spread this even further and wider once we're back to some sort of normality and these lockdowns end. But if there's someone who's not so sure about podcasts, when they're not looking, just get their phone, download a podcast app. It could be, as I've said before, Apple, Spotify, Google, Acast, Amazon. Download that app, search for Transplants Take on Sport, and just press subscribe or follow. It's completely free, so nobody's losing out there. and hopefully that might help with downloads. Be cheeky here, and we can boost that up and help more people see it. It would also mean a massive amount to me if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. That is the most listened or most used app, I should say. If you could leave a 5-star review on there, or rate it 5 stars, that would mean a huge amount to me. I said I'd read out any 5-star reviews on the podcast, and we've had a couple more in. So Matty C86 says, excellent and well worth listening to. Every episode shows how having a transplant affects the patient and their loved ones in a different way. Amazing podcast and well worth listening to. And the Kev says, great little podcast, 5 stars. I've listened to a couple of the pods. It's good to hear stories and proves that we can all achieve our goals, no matter our abilities or conditions. So if you don't believe me, you can believe those 2 people who left reviews, along with the others, and all the people who rated it 5 stars so far. Simon, thank you once again for coming on. You've been a great guest. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplant's Take on Sport.